a different world, and the rituals that they used to have changed, and the rules have changed. And so it puts us back into that place of, anticipatory grief, as well as a place of existential not knowing what's going to happen next. This triggers, people with their symptoms and creates symptoms. And that makes it uh, even more difficult to adapt and to adjust, essentially, when you're constantly rolling forward, right? Like the snowball going downhill. It's constantly picking up speed and getting bigger and bigger. When your fears take over, you end up feeling like you're the snowball. This is a different experience now. And I think that's really affecting people psychologically. And the longer this goes on, I think what we're going to find is the psychological aspects are the things that we're going to need to really focus on and um, do our due diligence to provide, structures and opportunities to keep our mental health up, keep it focused, and keep it as positive as possible.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hi, welcome to the show, The Exploding Human. This is Bob Nickman. That was Mr. ALAN LIEBERT you heard at the beginning, and we're going to be talking to him today about the psychology of the pandemic. More about that in a second. First, I want to invite you to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. THEXPLODINGHUMAN.com. Come and check it out. I have all the episodes there, including photos of my guests and synopses of the episodes, a little bio on myself if you're interested in that, and a donate button if you want to support the show. That would be much appreciated. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel. That, of course, is free, and that is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Add the with Bob Nickman for the YouTube channel. So I was saying my guest today is ALAN LIEBERT, who is a licensed family therapist who also specializes in grief. And that is a lot of what's going on here with the pandemic. There is a global trauma that we talk about, and we're gonna discuss what has happened, how our lifestyles have changed, what it means to us to be quarantined, and what are some of the benefits maybe, and some of the solutions to some of the difficulties we're having, and what's going to happen when we come out of this isolated new way of being. There's a lot to talk about, so let's get started. This is ALAN LIEBERT.
When we talk about what's happened, we have to start with what we would call the global trauma that happened when the coronavirus started to change our experience in the world. And from there, we would go to what we call the global shock, which was the shock that all of a sudden, this is real and this is really happening and our lives are changing. And then we move from there to a global grief, which was a mourning that we couldn't go and do the same things we used to do because we had stay at home, stay in shelter, and all of a sudden things had changed and there was an unforeseen element that was dangerous, that we couldn't fight with an army or we couldn't fight in any other ways. And so that has led to all of us having different experience than what we're used to. And that's called angst. It's caused anxiety. It's caused depression. It's caused a whole slew of different sort of symptoms in reaction to this sort of emotional haze that happens when you're experiencing grief in this sense, we're experiencing grief in a global way as well, because every time we look for our answers, we're pushed back into the not knowing, into the unknown of what's the next steps are going to be.
I love the idea. I mean, I don't love the idea, but I'm intrigued by the idea of a global trauma. That I mean, obviously individuals experience trauma, but this really, at least in my lifetime, I mean, I guess you could say wars and things like that. But this is something that's, wars are specific to certain countries and certain specific areas. This really is, this pandemic has gone over the entire planet.
That's right. And so, a sense, we're looking for solutions because we're a solution oriented and very resilient country. But in this instance, we're dealing with something that is making it more difficult for us to be resilient because we don't have the ways in which to resolve this uh, sooner.
I think that's where a lot of the anger is coming from and a lot of the grief also. People are really upset, like, there's we have to be able to do something, you know. There's a great line. Did you ever see the movie Night of the Living Dead?
Yes,
And it's the zombies come out of the grave and they're attacking this house, and this woman is freaking out in the house, and she says, "There's got to be someone we can call." It was
right.
the funniest line in the movie because
It's true.
it was just great, and that's what it feels like. Don't you want to just go, "There's got to be somebody we can call"?
And I think that that is the element of that disconnect because there really isn't anyone to call at this point in time. And we're watching the news, we're reading the paper, we're watching the internet, and looking for a semblance of an answer that we can sort of build a framework around to understand and hopefully have some relief, emotional relief from this. Some of the people I work with are experiencing nightmares, anxiety, depression, of course, and all those issues, along with PTSD and other sorts of psychological aspects, are becoming more pronounced because of this unforeseen issue that is changing what they've known. And most people, what we've known, which is, we're able to get in our car and go places, visit with people, go to places where we normally have our ritual of shopping or going to work and having meaningful relationships through our interactions. And yes, being frustrated with traffic and other sorts of things. But at this point in time, all of that stuff is kind of a wash because it's all different.
It is really different. Like, I haven't hugged anyone other than my wife and my daughter at my house in, a couple of months. That's an odd thing.
It's a
And I was telling my daughter, I went for a walk with her yesterday, and I said, not only am I distancing myself from the other people walking, I don't even want to look them in the eye. And I noticed that I was looking away. It's like I was embarrassed that I was distancing myself from them, like they
mhm.
they were, defective in some way because they might have this. And I wasn't even, sometimes I can go hello through my mask, and I'm okay. But yesterday, I couldn't even look at them.
People are beginning to feel a sort of angst of being home so much and not being able to start to continue and move out. That inner resiliency that we have as a country and as a population that the United States has embarked on and always had, we're not really able to experience that so much at this point.
I was wondering how many people, when they're home, because you're home and you've got a lot of hours in the day to fill in a new way, are they becoming more introspective? Is it, is it forcing people to be alone with their own thoughts, which can be like really profound or also really unpleasant? Not just about the virus, but just their own thoughts. It's like, what's my life about? I would think a lot of people would start to question the basic tenets of their entire existence in some way because they have the time to do it.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right because I think that from what I'm hearing is people are looking at their lives and they're seeing that they're able to have a life, but not necessarily do all the things and run around and do all the things they used to do. There's a very famous psychiatrist, psychotherapist, Carl Jung, talked about the transcendent function of the personality. And we're sort of pushed into that place of having to transcend our circumstances. And we have to look at, or it behooves us to look at what are the things that are fulfilling us and the things that are providing us with emotional nutrients, and how much that will help us dealing with the present circumstances, knowing that we just don't know. So, how do we connect meaning and purpose? And what are the things that will help us um, get through this is really an important issue.
It does seem like that. I mean, I am sort of somebody that is able to spend a lot of time by myself and not feel like I'm missing out on anything. But I know there's quite a few people that don't live that way. And
Right.
it must, it's like, well, what distraction am I going to do next? And I've got to go here and I'm busy. This idea of being busy is an interesting concept too, because when you're constantly busy and you've got this thing, this idea of maybe I don't even know if it's just accomplishment of just being busy. Sometimes it's just being busy to be distracted and not be present. That it must create a lot of problems for people, and then now you're seeing people protesting. They can't, eh, they can't sit home. They're actually going a little nuts. It's like when I see a sign of somebody, I need a haircut. Really, that bad?
Right. Right. I cut my hair and I did a terrible job. So I think you're bringing up a really good point, which is after we are going through this global guilt and we're also mirroring and having a parallel process with what's happening in the world, what happens is we end up in this place of anticipatory grief. And you may have lots of feelings about that with your children and with your family. You can feel lots of different things in terms of what the situation is and then how that gets played out in the family system.
Yeah, because I'm wondering if that, and maybe I'm going a little more global with this, but if there's this social distancing and quarantining, and let's say it gets eased up, which it looks like that's going to be starting. What if there's a resurgence of cases and it has to go backwards to that? That seems like it's going to create.
Right. And I think that that's part of where the anticipatory grief actually has an object to fulfill its sort of destiny, which is that there's already been predictions of a second wave. So the question is how often and where do you go to have a semblance of the life that you used to have? And is that what we're looking to do? My guess is we don't know.
Well, that's some in some ways harder. We don't not knowing is a really disturbing state
It
for.
is. It's a very existential state. And what happens when people don't know? You may notice people, you may notice yourself. You might become a little irritable. You might become kind of angry or angry at situations you wouldn't normally be angry at. You might feel guilty that you can't take care of your family in the way that you would like to, or you're concerned, which so many people are and have, and it's a very scary proposition, which is people not having the income that they used to have or had in order to fulfill their life and their families.
Yeah.
So there can be lots of feelings around all of that.
Well, just
So
the
that,
financial thing alone is
yeah.
absolutely terrifying.
So people want to have answers for these things so they can put together their world to move forward. And so this experience is it's a very challenging, at the very least, experience that people are having right now.
And some of the things that I think, humans do when we're in that confused state of I don't know, we have this ability to create a scenario in our minds where we do know, even if it's not accurate. For example, it's a conspiracy. That's it's
Yeah.
or blame goes to this person. If only they had done this, then we wouldn't be in this state of not knowing. um it's these people. It's you know what I'm saying. It becomes
Yes.
the need to know is so strong that despite facts, human beings can make up a known.
They surmise that certain things have happened. They put together these stories, whether they're conspiracies or not. And what happens is when those things start to falter, then they're stuck with the existential experience, which is they're here now and it's a different world and they can't, the rituals that they used to have changed and the rules have changed. And so it puts us back into that place of, anticipatory grief as well as a place of existential not knowing what's going to happen next. This triggers, people with their symptoms and creates symptoms. And that makes it uh, even more difficult to adapt and to adjust essentially when you're constantly rolling forward, right? Like the snowball going downhill. It's constantly picking up speed and getting bigger and bigger. When your fears take over, you end up feeling like you're the snowball.
So easy to scare the crap out of yourself.
It is.
Watch the news for 20 minutes. I mean, I read an article that said there's never been a vaccine for any coronavirus, and this idea that there's going to be a vaccine is probably false. That isn't something that's going to happen. So whether that's a true article or not a true article, I read it, and
Right.
and I was like, well, there you go. It's unsolvable. 60% of the population is going to have to get this in order to have immunity. And and I know I know the most dangerous amount of knowledge
Right.
to be of no service to anyone. It's all what I'm reading online and in the papers, and so I don't know.
Right. And I think that place of unknowing is a very challenging place to be in.
Have you had any patience with direct experience with someone that's had the
No,
COVID-19 or has passed away from it?
no, I have not. The closest thing I had was I went to the doctors to get a test, and before I left, I heard him yell the doctor yell out, "We have to do a COVID-19 test on the person in room A." So
Okay.
that was the closest.
Yeah.
But look at my behavior after that. I left there as fast as possible. I went home, and I took all my clothes and everything and put it in the washing machine.
Yeah.
Took off my gloves, threw them away, cleaned everything up. And so that is that when something is as invisible as this, it creates another element of fear-inducing experiences.
Yeah. And you'll probably, when you go back to the doctor, you'll request to be put in not room A.
The patients that I'm seeing, a lot of the patients are feeling um, isolated, lonely,
Yeah.
bored, in limbo, um, feeling more out of control, uh, feeling kind of emotionally lost. And I have actually a few patients that are actually doing better, oddly enough.
I would think that you'd be doing better if you're somebody that lived alone anyway and you were kind of used to it and you didn't feel your lifestyle was that altered.
I have a couple people that are actually improving. Um, but so, some people I talk to more than once a week,
Hmm.
and I am available to the people I see. They have my number and they know they can call me during this time because this is a time where you really want to be there for the people you treat.
Absolutely. I have a friend who's, oh, he's a single guy and he has a house, and he was saying, he goes, I can only spend so much time on the phone or on FaceTime or talking to people. He goes, but there's 15 hours a day I've got to fill
Hmm.
it with he goes, I exercise and I do projects, and there's things I do, but he goes, it's too much time
That's
to
right.
not be around people.
That's right. And I think that that's really part of the problem here is that um, you're going to really have to structure your time And that's a challenge. I think it's also really important for people. So you hear people talk about, well, if you're depressed, go see a professional. Um, do all these other sorts of techniques that can help you. And yes, that's true, but there's also simpler things you can do. So, one of the things that's very important is to have meaningful contact with others and to have meaningful conversations with others. That gives you a sense of connection and connectivity and shared humanness, which is very important during times like this. The United States really hasn't had this kind of experience. We had 9/11, which was terrible in and of itself, but not this experience of really having our world turn upside down. So having meaningful connections and having meaningful things that you like to do are important. If you start to feel angst or you feel anxiety or get irritable, then you might want to play music that you love or watch something that you love or write or pick up the phone and call someone or be on Zoom. If you like flowers, looking at flowers or pictures of flowers. Or if you're in a garden, go out and work in the garden. So there's all sorts of things you can do to sort of address the issue of a loss of emotional nutrients that you have in connection with each other. And part of it is, we have our family we connect with, and that's very, very important. But we also have people on the streets that we connect with as well. And so we're losing some of that.
We're losing some of that, but I'm also seeing more people out walking together, which I haven't seen. People have stopped by. My wife has a really beautiful garden in front, and they'll stop and they'll take pictures. I never knew this was here. They'll start, with the proper distancing, they'll
Uh-huh.
talk. And we're actually getting to meet people that we don't haven't previously met because they're out walking and they're like, we never knew you had such a great little garden. And it was just, there's a whole other sort of, we're in this together piece,
And
which is,
I think you just hit on something that's really salient here and important, which is that when the walls of our everyday lives have changed and dramatically changed, and we can't just pop back into them, we're developing ways in order to connect, which is obviously the garden that you have in your front yard is providing that experience and opportunity for others. It's pretty great.
yeah. And that, my wife's out there working right now. She's decided to make that her thing, which it is her thing. I mean, she does that, but she is really spending even more time being very, mindful of each little piece of that garden because it's giving her some of the things that she's not able to do out in the world, which is fantastic. Now, I have noticed though, people have said to me they try to take a positive attitude with, well, since I have to be home, I'm going to do some of these things that I've been putting off for so long. I'm going to clean my closet, let's say. And then they don't do it and they feel really bad about it. It's like,
Right.
I said I was going to be productive and I'm not, and then they're getting down on themselves.
There's a sense when you're in an emotional haze um, of lack of motivation
Yes.
because you don't feel in control, and that's part of the parallel process. We don't feel in control because this disease is controlling us, and we don't have a way to be in control in relationship to it, other than we don't want a relationship to it.
Yeah.
And so what happens is we have a lack of motivation, and that's our response.
So that's what it is. Cause I've had a few of those incidences myself where I'm like, I'm not doing
Right.
that.
But there's some people talk about it as if they're a prisoner,
Yes. I think a
and they
lot of people feel imprisoned.
and they feel imprisoned, and that's a totally different mindset as well. Because not only you feel powerless, but you kind of feel kind of tortured through the isolation and the loneliness, and you feel like you can't really make a dent in it. So that brings us to the point of having to develop new rituals and new ways and being able to have a fulfilling life even during the circumstances we're in. So I have patients that are very much into prayer. I have patients that are very much into meditation and spiritual life,
Hmm.
cooking, and they have family members, so they all cook together. So there's a more of togetherness going on.
Well, in a sense, it does force us back into the way we lived in simpler times, in previous times when there was less distraction. That's an interesting aspect to me when you talk about families cooking together and maybe having dinner together and talking. It's I really like that kind of stuff.
Well,
That there's more of that, I would imagine now.
when you think about people on in their wagons going out to the west, they were traveling and not knowing where they're going to go. They may have an idea, but they don't know what the journey is going to be like to get there, right? And we have very much created a world or a map of our world in which we knew where the journey was and where we're headed. Yes, there were uncontrollable variables. So, in a certain sense, we never really knew, but we had enough patterns and structure that we could sort of circumvent that by moving towards certain goals and doing certain things. With that being erased, we're left to ourselves again.
So you have this need, I think, to appreciate the moment is really all you have in situations like this. And maybe that's the way to live anyway. I mean, it seems like it is the day at a time kind of attitude where you're just saying, well, I don't know what's going to be tomorrow because I really don't. And now I can just really do today in a way that maybe I haven't done that for a while.
So can I ask you a question? When you talk to your daughter about this, what's that conversation like?
um, I haven't talked to her about it that much. What we're focusing on is she got into college and she really wants to go to college
Uh-huh.
and not live at home anymore, and that's what we want. So it's I just hope that's what's going to be in the fall, that I can go away to college and start the things that I want to do. The idea of staying here living with you and your mom, me and my wife, is really not a pleasant thought to her. It's not like a torture or anything, 'cause we all get
Right.
along, but she's really ready. And that's really, it's all about sort of that hope. And she's spending a lot of time on looking at media and being distracted with television and movies and talking to her friends. However, probably the best thing that's come out of it between me and my daughter is that we're walking together every day,
Oh,
which we weren't doing. And so we're taking an hour walk and just talking about life.
that's
But
wonderful.
and there, yeah, and she doesn't have a lot of fear about anything right now. She's just impatient to get going at 18. I get it. I didn't want to live at my parents' house either when I was 18. So
But I
eh,
think you're addressing something we were talking about earlier, which is that sense of angst.
yeah, a little bit of that. We both, we're all sort of anticipating what we want to be in September, October, and it's only April.
That's right.
Yeah, but it's an odd thing to be living um, uh, now, but looking forward to it being several months from now in this way. It's almost like it's kind of like, well, it is grief because like when someone dies or there's a breakup or you have this thing, you kind of go, "Oh, I can't wait for it to be 6 months from now, so I don't have to feel this bad." It is similar to that.
What is, and I think, grief is not just about loss of people, it's loss of experiences and loss of opportunities and loss of a lot of different things. And I don't think the world has faced such a global loss and anticipatory grief and the fear of further loss. Certainly in my lifetime.
It's really, a new thing, because other traumas are quick. even war that goes on for years, it's somebody's going to win that thing by the end. But natural disasters, they come and they hit real hard and then they go away, and then you do
Mhm.
your cleanup, and that's true of most things that are traumatic. They're pretty quick relative this and known.
I guess advent of this is you're right, which is being in the present. And then the question is, how do you want to be in the present? So, do you want to be in the present with kindness, with gratitude and acceptance and love of fellow humanity? Even if you're not like that all the time, at least you're that in that place for an extended period of time. Because some people don't go there. They are predisposed to go into anger or resentment. They want their environment to be a product of them, and so this is a different experience now, and I think that's really affecting people psychologically. And the longer this goes on, I think what we're going to find is the psychological aspects are the things that we're going to need to really focus on and um, do our due diligence to provide structures and opportunities to keep our mental health up, keep it focused, and keep it as positive as possible.
I was actually asking myself the other day, is it okay for me to be joyful during this time at all? I've actually wondered, is that an okay thing to do?
Well, I think I understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
And
it's
and
like other people are really struggling more than I am. People are sick, people are dying, and I'm like, it's like a survivor's guilt in a sense. It's like, am I acting in a way that's not reverent by feeling joy?
well, I think that's a good point. How much do you feel for the suffering in humanity? I don't know how much we've had about that in the last 10 years in our country. And for people who are, people in our country. Uh, I have an acquaintance of mine who I ran into, and I said, "How are you doing?" And they said, "Well, I've never been better. I'm actually happy. I'm enjoying this. This has been really a good experience for me. I'm really happy." And I walked away thinking, huh, they didn't say anything about feeling bad for the people that are suffering. So I think it brings out all different sorts of responses to what we're dealing with.
Yeah, I don't know the appropriate way to feel.
And there is none. There
I guess
absolutely is
not.
none.
I mean, there's moments I'm having a great time during the day, and then there's other moments I feel really, horrible for, people
Yeah,
in
I'm
terrible situations, and
driving down the street and seeing a homeless person walking down the street, knowing their susceptibility to all the different elements of what could happen to them. It hurts. It certainly hurts me as a person to see their suffering.
I've never known how to really uh, be in the world that way. It's like how much, where does, compassion end and my own joy begin, and can I do both? Which I think I can, and that's what I
Yeah.
try to do. But sometimes I'm like, man, I'm like way too happy today for for what's
Right.
going on.
Well, I think it's really good for for us physiologically, from what doctors have told me, for us to be as positive we can during challenging times like this. If you follow the news, there's a lot of talk about essentially nothing. There's a lot of talk about that there is no resolve to this,
Yeah.
and they're picking apart all these different sorts of points of view, but underneath those points of view is essentially that we don't have an answer for this yet. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That's the thing. You can't speed up time. It's just the way time goes at the pace that it goes, especially with something like this. It's not on our time. It's on nature's time. So that's another frustration, I think. And I was going to say what's helping me. The two main things that are helping me, aside from I'm very fortunate that my family is here with me, so I'm not completely isolated. But the idea of meditation, which I'm doing, very, I guess, every day for a little bit longer than I normally do, and I have a situation where I'm being of service to an older person on our street, and that is super fulfilling to be able to check in with somebody who can't do a lot of the things that I can do.
Well, I think that's really important. Um, Being of service, giving. There's a lot of tools you can get off the internet in terms of meditation is very helpful because it helps you take a step back from where you are to having your inner world and your inner experience. You're able to have two different experiences. You don't have to just have one in order to give us that feeling that, yes, this is going to stop at some point. At some point, we'll be able to overcome this.
Well, that's, I mean, just natural laws that things start and then they end at some point.
Right, that's right.
So,
Absolutely.
so we know that it's going to end. We don't know how,
That's
and
right.
what's that going to look like?
That's right.
And I guess the real fear is, am I going to end? Not-
Well, I think that's,
Which I am someday. Obviously, that's
right.
what's going to happen.
That's a vulnerability that we're experiencing, not only individually and family wise, but in terms of a country, in terms of really globally, the world. We have all these differences that we to differentiate ourselves from each other. This disease has shown us that we're all really similar.
Oh yeah, it doesn't care about any of the things that we care about in terms of differences. It's a great leveler in that way.
So when people have to deal with a great leveler, they rely on a lot of different things. What do you rely on for yourself?
You're actually asking me that?
Yeah.
Oh, oh, okay. Feel now like I'm in therapy. You're not going to charge me
Well,
for this,
tell
are
you what, I'll put it
you?
back on me. So what I rely on is I meditate, I read positive affirmations in books. I find that if I can hold hope, no matter what the circumstances are, that helps me transcend experiences by holding hope and carrying that hope with me. Um, I run into people I know, and those experiences of being around someone else reminds me how precious humanity is and how beautiful we are as people. So all those things for myself facilitate that for me.
And I also have found that keeping a really active sense of humor is super important for me. It
Well,
always has been, and I just
yeah,
and to laugh in the face of something that's a little bit frightening is not a bad way to go. And I also love very, very simple tasks that don't require a lot of thinking. They're just tasks that can be in the moment, whether it's
right.
digging up something, planting something, cleaning my desk, just something really that doesn't require a lot other than being in the moment to do it. And that's been
I,
really helpful to me.
I think, and all of us have those things that we can do. I have someone I work with that has a puppy, and their puppy gives them all the emotional nutrients, and the relationship between them and the puppy and that love, that bond helps them transcend being at home and feeling like they're not in control or can change and go out and do whatever they would like to do. So part of it is exactly that, which is to find those things that can bring you what you had termed earlier, joy, inner joy,
Hmm.
and be able to share that with other people is really a pretty wonderful thing. I know someone who they're having dinner parties with their friends on Zoom, and they're all in their living rooms, and they're all bring wine and they sit and talk, and it's been really a meaningful experience for them. I think it's a little different than it was 9, 10 months ago.
I always think about when I would read about the Great Depression, when my parents were young and people were jumping out of buildings because they had lost all their money. And I remember thinking, why would you do that? It's just, it's you can earn money back. It's a temporary, of course, now it's many years down the road, and that it seems even more absurd. But in that moment, there was a hopelessness and a despair, and a terror that they were already dead in a sense because they had
Well,
lost all their money.
I think, what my concern is that people are feeling that way because they're concerned about how to pay their rent, how to put
Yeah.
food on their table. When will they ever have it? Will they get I was in the bank and someone was talking to them whether they got their stimulus check or not and what account it should go in. And people are very scared.
That's the thing, if this goes on a certain length of time, more and more people are going to be in that situation where the money is run out. And if you have situations where you are being forced to either pay your rent or be put out on the street, and these are people that were never even close to that, that may
Mhm.
happen. I don't know. I mean, obviously now there's a moratorium in most places on foreclosures and evictions and things
Right.
like that. But even the people that are not able to foreclose or evict, that they're going to be suffering too because they owe money to somebody or they have to do it. This thing affects everybody. I mean, we're all interconnected. It's just going to, sort of work its way up from the bottom. And
I think so. And what I notice where I live is there's more rent signs out now. Because I talked to a friend of mine, he was saying that a lot of his son's friends are not renting apartments anymore. They're going and living with their family.
nobody gets out of this thing without being affected
Touch.
in some way. Maybe there's a top tier of people that are going to,
Right.
but they're immune to all that kind of financial stuff. But most most of humanity is not.
That's right.
And that is really scary when you think about what we do as humans every day and how we live and survive and not be able to do that because you can only do so much from your computer.
And I think that's where faith comes in and hope.
I'm looking forward to when this how people will change or not change based on this experience. Somebody was asking me, do you think the world's going to be different, not as a direct result of this, but as the way people, well, as a result of the way people have had to go inward and appreciate certain things. And I think it will for some, but I think those kinds of things are like they have a half life. It's like after time goes on, you forget, and you get, it's really easy to get pulled back into what the masses are doing.
And I think that's what's so disturbing about this because we don't really know what elements of what our life was like before that we're going to be able to actually access and fulfill.
Yeah, I was talking to a guy the other day. He's a ticket reseller. That's what he does. He's got no business because there's no events. He just
Right.
it just went away,
Right.
gone. And all those businesses where people congregate in large groups.
Yeah. It's sad, very sad. But still with it, it's important to weather it and to move on and find the things that fulfill you so you can balance it out between the hardship and the personal growth and the learning about how to adjust.
I'm glad we're talking about it because I think it's it's on everyone's mind. Obviously, it's the thing that's on everyone's mind these days. So hopefully, the listeners will get something out of this, and maybe we've touched on some of the things that they're thinking and haven't been able to articulate.
Yeah, I hope so as well. It's always a pleasure, and I'm always thankful to have the opportunity to talk with you.
Well, we love having you, and I say we, but it's just me.
Okay.
People always refer to themselves in the we plural, like it's like
Right.
I'm an organization of some kind. It's just
Right.
me.
That's right.
Well, thanks, Alan. I'm going to end the recording, but then I'll talk to you some more.
Thank you so much.
Of course, big thanks to Alan Liebert once again. I think that was his fourth visit to the show, and he's always got some wonderful insights. I love talking to the guy. And once again, please visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. And if you want to donate once you're there, I won't say no. Thanks very much. And also, subscribe to the YouTube channel. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Thanks so much for listening to the show, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.